وآل Muhammad. Salli ala Muhammad. Respected Maulana, dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum. Tonight marks the 9th of Muharram. Our program tonight will be comprised of a recitation by Brother Musa Castillo, and this will be followed by tonight's lecture led by Hujjatul Islam, Sayyid Sulayman Hasan Abidi. Before we begin our program, I would like to request you all to please take a moment and if you can double check your cell phones to make sure that it is either on mute or on vibrate. At this time, we will begin our program. I would like to kindly request Brother Musa Castillo to please come forward at this time. Please greet him with a loud salawat.
For my recitation, I will have three pieces for you all. The first one will be from a wonderful book that I had recently bought that has been very helpful to me, and it's very nice to go through. One of my sources of inspiration is, if anybody has known, or the tragedy of Karbala, highly recommend it. If we could get a loud salawat for the writer of this book, please. This first one is called A Palm Full of Water and is referred to Hazrat Abbas. Please recite salawat. If your hands are empty, are you warm like Abbas? No water pouch and so thirsty, and the devil's in the cause. My niece, she would cry with a dried out throat. So I promised my life that I would bring back home. He asked me for my sword and gave me a flag. I mounted the steed and held tightly the flask. Kicked the horse to go faster, and the army came running. I drove towards the stream, the bowmen were strumming. The arrows felt like rain. My blood quenched its thirst, but I reached the Furat, and here is my word. A palm full of water, and I see in it not a reflection of me, but the thirst of my niece. No drop for my tongue. Yes, in thirst I could die, for how could I quench when her thirst couldn't hide? So I filled up my flask, mounted the steed to go back. However, ambush was set, and the devils attacked. First one arm was severed, so then falls the flag. Then my other arm slice, my teeth I hold fast. Then came the arrow that destroyed my home. It pierced the backside and left this man broke. How could I return to my knees with no water, no arms to fetch more? So I fought back a martyr. I cried for my master. My brother finds me, puts my head on his lap, and broken I speak. Forgive me for failing. Leave this body outside. Do not take me back, for her thirst didn't die. Instead, let me see you, my master, one last time. But he asks a request, one I couldn't deny. Bearing witness with life, became a beacon in death, cleaned the blood from my eye. My brother, I said, Salawat. This next one that I had written, it is in the moment of Imam Hussein, a man who always gives second chances, even after everything that he's been through. He is still giving the enemy a chance to consider. The name of this next poem is Considered. Please recite a salawat. Have you considered? Have you put a thought to it? For whom you will betray? If he were here, if he would see you now, Rasulullah would stop and think how can you betray your own soul, your own deed? How dare you, O slay my love, my own family? How can you not care? They are all so young. Will you truly dare take their heads and have them hung? Did you not stop? Did you not stop and think to give them food or anything to drink? While my Hussein, well, he did it for free. You've brought him pain, Those who hurt him hurt me. How can you betray your own soul, your own deed? How dare you slay my love, my own family? Oh God, you know what's fair. You'll take them while they're young. They'll arrive to you in prayer. Their memories will be sung. Salawat. Allahumma Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The title of this next one that I made needs no explanation. This one is called The Cry from a Cradle. Surrounded by 1,000 soldiers, how can they betray their Imam? My family pushed into a corner, thirsty under the scorching sun. My mercy for you is almost over. You'll only get it from Allah. And yet your hearts are getting colder. You now won't even praise your God. I see no way out, my Lord. My companions lie on the ground. They lay in the pool of their own blood. My tears begin to form a flood. I can hear crying in the distance from the cradle of Ali Asghar. I run to give him assistance, only to see his lips are parched. I'm helpless to bring him water, even when I send a bus. Can I reason with them, Father? Pray they stop attacking us. I see no way out, my Lord. My companion lie on the ground. They lay in the pool of their own blood. My tears begin to form a flood. My Lord, you have made me selfless. I will give them one more chance to show how weak and defenseless. May the enemy not advance. You see, he is just a young boy. By God, my son will bring you no harm. Yet they shot an arrow at my pride and joy. Now his blood runs down my arm. I see no way out, my Lord. My companions lie on the ground. They lay in the pool of their own blood. My tears begin to form a flood. The angels came down from the sky to hold my sweet son. I give my last goodbye. They take him to Jannah where the birds forever sing. Praise be to Allah. Ali no longer is suffering. Salawat.
Inshallah, Brother Musa, a beautiful recitation. Brothers and sisters, for Brother Musa, Sehet, Salamti, and Khair Barakat, please recite a loud salawat. Ma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I'd like to share some community announcements at this time. Registration for Bethel Ilm's Academy Sunday School is now open for ages 2 to 15. This year, we will begin using the Tarbiyah curriculum created by the Madrasa Center of Excellence. This curriculum will include textbooks as well as an online platform that students can use at home. You can find the links to the registration forms on Bethel Ilm's website at bethelilm.org. For more questions on the curriculum, please email the administration at bethelilm@gmail.com. And the last day to register is July 31st. Also, as we've been reminding you all these last several evenings, Bethel Ilm is hosting its 14th annual blood drive on August 6th from 10 to 4 p.m. Registration is upstairs in the lobby. Additionally, Bethel Ilm will be hosting ladies and girls Muharram Majlises every Saturday starting July 22nd to September 23rd at 11 a.m. This will be located in the North Building. Registration is online if you wish to participate as a reciter. We have one new announcement. There's a special opportunity this year being offered by a community member as a way to help and support and fund Bethel Ilm. This year, there will be a raffle held to win a beautifully crafted ring made from the blessed white stone from the grave of Imam Hussein alayhi salam and a marble slab from the grave of Hazrat Abbas alayhi salam. Tickets will be sold for $50 each. You are allowed to purchase more than one ticket. If you would like to purchase a ticket, please contact Sister Fatima Walji or Brother Jawad. The Unity Academy of Chicago's Cub Scout Pack will be hosting a fundraiser luncheon on Saturday, August 19th at 2:30 p.m. at Bethel Ilm. The Cub Scouts will be selling tickets for $10 per person to help fund scouting activities in the coming school year. During the lunch, they will show slides and presentations of their scouting activities from the past season. They will also commemorate the tragedy of Karbala along with all of the other believers. This event is open to all community members. Now on to some logistics for tomorrow, for the day of Ashura. The Amal will begin at 8 a.m. We will reconvene for Jummah at 1 p.m. This will be followed by both English Majlis as well as an Urdu Majlis. We will conclude with Ziyarat and Faqa Shikni. The logistics around Faqa Shikni are that brothers will be doing their Faqa Shikni here in the banquet hall, while the sisters' arrangements have been made upstairs in the Sunday school foyer, as well as the multi-purpose room. as well as downstairs in the Sunday school foyer and the library. For the Sham al-Ghariba program, we will begin with Salat al-Maghrib at 8:30. This will be followed by Salam, Marsiya, and again in English and in Urdu Majlis. We will recite Salam-e-Akhir at 10 p.m. and we will conclude with Matam and Ziyarat. I would also like to point out that during the day there will be an Ashura procession in downtown Chicago. This will be from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. to commemorate the martyrdom of Imam Hussein, his family, and his companions. The start of this program and the Julus will be at the Thompson Center at 100 West Randolph Street in Chicago. I would now like to recognize our sponsors for tonight's program. For the health, safety, and continued blessings for Dr. Amjad Safvi and Brother Musa Ali Naqvi and their respective families, please recite aloud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The sponsors have requested that you remember your marhumin as well as their marhumin. Please join me in reciting a Surah Fatiha preceded by aloud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali. Brothers and sisters, before I request Maulana, please double check your cell phones once again to make sure they are on mute or on vibrate. Also, the administration let me know that downstairs here in the library, they have made arrangements for mothers with young children if you choose to use that facility as well. At this time, I would like to request Hujjatul Islam, Sayyid Sulayman Hasan Abidi, to please come to the minbar at this time. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين المبعوث رحمة للعالمين شفيع المذنبين وحبيب قلوب الصادقين سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله عز وجل في القرآن المجيد: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل إن صلاتي ونسكي ومحياي ومماتي لله رب العالمين لا شريك له وبذلك أمرت وأنا أول المسلمين. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We have been looking at how it is possible for us to live a godly life and a God-centered or God-oriented life, where as we go through the different roles and decisions in our worldly existence, we are not just serving our own whim and desire and a goal that is not worth our attention and our effort, but rather we are serving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and a goal that is worthy of our soul and our existence. And we have looked at a number of different areas of concentration and focus. Some of those areas where our initial inclination, or maybe what is common in our culture, actually leads us away from a good decision. And we have to be very careful and aware of those areas where what seems to be common knowledge and conventional wisdom is actually foolishness and misguidance. It's not always easy because it is what everyone is saying and living like, whereas it is not to our benefit. Among the areas that we need to be aware of are our relationships and our responsibilities to our family members, to our relatives, to our community, and in particular to all of those who are followers of our Prophet and Ahlul Bayt. Sometimes in the Muslim community, we have a difficulty being united. And sometimes we only are united when we have a threat from the outside. And so that fear and that siege kind of brings us to temporarily forget our own animosities and maybe work together. But then as soon as that threat is lifted, then we remember all of our old scores and differences, and we may take revenge on one another. Now, that is a negative unity that is imposed by circumstances from the outside. But what we as Muslims need to develop is a positive unity that comes not from facing a common threat, but from affirming a shared set of values. And if we are not able to do so, then that means that we are not properly attentive to our shared values. It's not just the effect that is a problem, which is that it causes maybe sectarian fights and divisions among Muslims. It is a deeper problem than that harm or that effect, because it means that I am disconnected from the source of my religious values and goals in life. And there are concentric circles. We have a shared value system with all people who believe in God. And in particular with people who believe in one God, even if their understanding of the oneness of God is deficient or is different from our own. And that shared goal is that we want the question of the purpose of life and the value of the human soul to be a relevant and an important question within society, regardless of how a person may think or may answer that question. But when the belief in God is viewed negatively, when it is viewed sarcastically, when religion and religious people are associated with undesirable attributes, moral attributes, or actions within society, unjustly. But what does that mean? It means that many people, they will not even examine the question of which scripture or which religion is the most authentic representation of God's revelation for humanity. People will be turned off even to examining the question. Why? Because of that prejudice or that impression that exists within society. So I shouldn't take pride if the members of another religion are ignorant or are viewed with disdain. If that means that God and God's name and the question of faith and belief in God is also going to be looked at as unimportant and irrelevant to human success and salvation and society. If we have a strong religious identity, then sometimes we become competitive with other religions. But as a Muslim, I shouldn't take pride if people are losing faith in Christianity or in Judaism, or if they think that these other religions are just an excuse for people to make their personal profit or get power. If that loss of faith and that negative impression that people have about other religions represents their belief about religion and their belief about God and revelation in entirety. Because that doesn't mean that they are more likely to be guided or to become Muslim. It means that in that society, Muslims also are likely to lose their faith or dilute their identification with their religion, because it is a society that doesn't value faith and doesn't know and see a place for it. And a society that only sees material things and only values material success, that is not a healthy environment for a Muslim to live in. So on one very broad level, we may have many differences with followers of other faiths. But we have an interest that belief in God and that a life of faith and that believing in values that are not just material but that are religious and spiritual, these ideals should be valued within society. And that can form a basis for us to have a relationship even with people whose religious beliefs and religious laws and rituals and ideas are very different from our own. Then coming closer, we have an even greater responsibility and a relationship with people who are followers of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And if the only thing that I can think of is how I disagree with another school of thought within Islam, now those differences are real and they are important. And if somebody says that I am just a Muslim and I am not a Sunni or a Shia or a member of any school of thought, then it will not be possible for them to be a Muslim, because they will have to pray, they will have to fast, and they will have to follow one set of teachings about how our Prophet taught us to do those things. Just like people who say that I believe in Islam but I don't value culture will not be able to implement Islam and develop a society on faith, because those Islamic values will always be represented within culture and traditions. Similarly, if I say that I am a Muslim and I don't belong to any school of thought, then I will not be able to carry out and apply the teachings and the commandments of Islam, because I have to refer to the guidance from our Prophet, and that guidance is going to come either from Ahlul Bayt ﷺ, or from the companions, or from some source. Yet if the only thing I see is those differences among schools of thought, and I don't think that I have a shared destiny and a shared obligation with other Muslims, then that means that I have not properly honored the position of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alih as the Prophet of Islam. Because anyone who says, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, that person has a relationship with me and we have mutual obligations. And one of our obligations is to make sure that our disagreements and our differences don't distract from our shared belief and our shared call that there is one God and that Muhammad is his prophet. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So you can see how sometimes when we lose sight of the belief in one God, or we lose sight in the importance and the centrality of the Prophet, then we actually distract people, Muslims and non-Muslims, from those fundamental beliefs. This is that positive identity when I truly care about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His name being honored. When I truly care about our Prophet and his message being known and his name being honored, then every other disagreement or fight that I might have, that will not disappear, but it will remain within a certain perspective and proportion. And I won't need an enemy attacking to make common cause with a fellow Muslim, because that positive identity and that shared worship of one God and that shared obedience to our Prophet will bring us common cause in many areas in spite of our disagreements. And the closest circle and the greatest responsibility is with those who believe in Allah and believe in the Prophet and believe in Ahlul Bayt as the successors of our Prophet. For those who believe in Imam Ali alayhi salam and the Imams from the descendants of Imam Ali, we have the highest level of mutual obligation and responsibility, because we are one fraternity. They are not just acquaintances for you. They are not just friends or community members. They are our brothers and our sisters, and our relationship is based on grace and not just on fairness and justice. We have to go above and beyond the call of duty. And that is beautifully represented in the will of one of the companions of our 8th Imam, Imam Ali al-Rida alayhi salatu wassalam. And this bears periodic reminding, even if you have heard this will before, because we get into disagreements with our family members and with our community, and we have to remember what is the basis for transcending those differences. This companion was known as Ali ibn Yaqtib. And he was one of the fuqaha of his time. So when we look at the companions of the Imams, don't think of them just as narrators of hadith. They were pillars of their community, just like our maraja and our fuqaha are today, in some cases even more learned than the greatest of scholars that we may have seen or heard of. Ali ibn Yaqteen says that I spent 60 years of my life in the service of my fellow believers, learning, writing, teaching, defending. And he went through many hardships and many difficulties, because in this time there was the oppression of the government, and those who were prominent scholars, they bore the brunt of that oppression and that fear. So they had the oppression of the Abbasid government, which in the time of Ma'mun was at the height of its power. Some people call it the golden age of the Abbasid Empire. It was a time of great wealth and great military expansion, but that power and that wealth meant that the lovers of Ahlul Bayt had the greatest pressure and suppression on their shoulders. But you would think that at least when they would come into their own community, they would have security and peace. And Ali ibn Yaqteen says that because I was spreading the authentic teachings of Ahlul Bayt, people often didn't like it. They had their exaggerated beliefs. They have their own superstitions and their own ideas that they valued more than listening to what Ahlul Bayt actually said. And so when I would write, when I would speak, when I would defend, it isn't just the enemies that would attack Ali ibn Yaqteen, but often it was the people who said that we are the followers of Ahlul Bayt. And they caused him great grief. They caused him the loss of property and safety, and they damaged his reputation by making all sorts of accusations against him and made life difficult for him. And then Ali ibn Yaqteen, he makes a will on his deathbed. He says that any of those people who has accused me falsely, who has done anything against me, if they have the wilayah of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam in their heart, salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad, then I testify before Allah that I have forgiven them. I hold no personal grudge. Everything that I worked for and that I struggled for, and if I opposed their superstition and their false beliefs, it wasn't for my own sake, it was for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It was for the teachings and the values of Imam Ali alayhi salam, which is the authentic teachings of Islam, the authentic teachings of our Prophet and commandments of Allah. And so if that person still has enough good in their heart that Imam Ali says that this is a wali and a follower of mine, then I, Yunus ibn Abdul Rahman, pardon me, I have no grudge against that person. But if Imam Ali says that this person is not a wali of mine, then Yunus ibn Abdul Rahman says that I will not nurse a personal grudge. What I did was in service of my Imam. And so it is up to my Imam to decide whether that person is worthy of his grace, forgiveness, intercession or not. So this is a role model for us on how we can overcome our petty differences and sometimes even those non-petty, very real differences that are on the basis of our values and that are because of our religious beliefs. It is not about our agreement or our disagreement, but it is about our values. And so we can refer back to our Imam. And that can be a basis for forgiveness and for understanding and for conciliation. So our relationships, they are rooted in our commitment and our obligation to our Imam. If we remember that positive source of our mutual obligation, then we will be able to keep all of our differences within perspective, and we will be able to fulfill our responsibilities to our fellow believers and to all members of humanity. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Now, in maintaining those relationships, we have to remember that there will always be baggage. There will always be a cultural context. There will always be a certain element of our relationship that is not just a matter of my decision making or my liking. And Islam is a religion that establishes connections and community. It is not a religion that is meant to be practiced in solitude. The most important surah of the Quran is Surah Al-Fatiha. And Surah Al-Fatiha, after it introduces Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, continues with a prayer. And that prayer is a collective prayer. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'een. I might be reciting this surah individually, or I might be praying individually, but my prayer and my supplication to Allah is not an individual prayer, it is a collective prayer. Iyaka na'budu means that, oh Allah, you alone do we worship as a community. Wa iyaka nasta'een means, oh Allah, you alone do we seek help from as a collective and not just as an individual. Ihdinas sirat al-mustaqim, not ihdinis sirat al-mustaqim. Guide us and not guide me. So your wish and prayer and your effort is to establish a community. And when there is a community, there is going to be baggage. There is going to be a culture that will come with it. So don't be dismissive of those elements of community that allow people to have a shared understanding and practice of their religion. But always look to refine and reform those elements that may not be in accordance with our ideals. So you are looking to refine, but you are not looking to throw away and reinvent. When it comes, for example, to the commemoration of the martyrdom of Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wassalam, there are many elements that have come to us from our tradition and from those communities that have mourned Imam Hussein across the generations and centuries. Some of those traditions, they grew up in a particular cultural context, in a particular society. If they are not specifically revealed or emphasized by the Prophet or by the Imams, they can grow and develop and change as we enter into new environments, languages, and societies. But the values that are important within that commemoration, they should be carried over and they should remain. And that means that we should be respectful and humble about the ways that the lovers of Ahlul Bayt have commemorated the sacrifice of Imam Hussein throughout history until today. And then we look at that rich heritage and tradition, and we see how we can build upon it to make it even more relevant and even more loyal to the values and to the ideals of Ahlul Bayt themselves. There is a hadith which is narrated from our Prophet and from a number of our Imams. In one form, it is attributed to our fifth Imam, Imam Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salatu wassalam. He says, أَيُّمَا عَبْدٍ مِّنْ عِبَادِ اللَّهِ سَنَّ سُنَّةَ هُدًى فَلَهُ مِثْلُ أَجْرِ مَنْ عَمِلَ بِذَلِكَ وَأَيُّمَا عَبْدٍ مِّنْ عِبَادِ اللَّهِ سَنَّ سُنَّةَ ضَلَالٍ فَلَهُ مِثْلُ وِزْرِ مَنْ فَعَلَ ذَلِكَ. Whenever a person acts in society, then you are not just acting as an individual, you are acting as a member of a community, you are acting as a member of a family. You are establishing a precedent, or you are weakening a precedent, or you are strengthening a precedent that was established before you. In a society that is close-knit, and in a society that values our collective life, then our actions also are always going to either establish or weaken or strengthen the precedents that exist within our community. That's less so in a society that doesn't value precedent. So in our society, because it is very individualistic, we sometimes don't realize that there is a precedent that is being established. There is a culture that is being established by my words and by my deeds. But that's because in our contemporary culture, sometimes people carry the individualism to an extreme. So for example, I've heard people say that, I want to choose a name for my child. And I want it to be a really unique name. And so they'll pick some name, they don't even know the origin or the etymology. Maybe it's Greek, maybe it's Arabic, maybe it's from Aztec, who knows, but it sounds nice. And according to the internet, it says it means something nice. Now, what's wrong with Fatima? What's wrong with Zainab? What's wrong with Ja'far? What's wrong with Muhammad? Everybody is named those names. I want it to be unique. Even if they choose a name that is not unique, they want to find a unique spelling so that there is something different. Now, there's nothing wrong with having a unique element in the name. And you can give a first name and a second name, and one of them can be unique. But you also have a big interest and benefit in maintaining continuity with your family and with your religion and with your traditions. And if everyone in the world were named Muhammad, that name would not grow common or overused. If everyone in the world were named Ali, that name would not grow common or overused. If everyone in the world were named Fatima or Zainab or Khadija, then those names would not become commonplace and they would not become overused, because those names represent the greatest role models of human character that we have as a human society. And so how can they grow stale? So in a society that understands the importance of connections and continuity, then there is a precedent that we are setting. Imam Muhammad Baqir alayhi salatu wassalam, he says that أَيُّمَا عَبْدٍ مِّنْ عِبَادِ اللَّهِ, any servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sanna sunnata hudan, who establishes a practice of guidance, a good practice. فَلَهُ مِثْلُ أَجْرِ مَنْ عَمِلَ بِذَلِكَ, he will have a share of the reward of anyone who acts according to that good practice. وَأَيُّمَا عَبْدٍ مِّنْ عِبَادِ اللَّهِ سَنَّ سُنَّةَ الضَّلَالِ. And anybody who establishes a practice of misguidance, فَلَهُ مِثْلُ وِزْرِ مَنْ فَعَلَ ذَلِكَ. He will have a share of the crime and the punishment of anybody who practices it. So whenever I act, then I shouldn't just think, well, it's my wedding, it's all about me and what I want. Think about what precedent I am establishing, especially, for example, if it's the first wedding in my extended family. Then if it's extravagant, if it is something which does not have an active component of worship and devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then is that setting a low bar for my brothers and sisters or my cousins or my friends? Is that a sunnat dalal that is going to weaken some of the good traditions of our community? Or is it a good tradition that I am establishing, which is sunnatul huda, the practice that leads to guidance? Whether it be naming our children, whether it be celebrating a graduation or a new home, or whether it be a wedding or any other area of our life, when we make decisions, then think of them as an opportunity. Even if I'm not somebody rich and famous, I'm not an influencer on Instagram, but within my own circle, even if it's a circle of 5 people, even if it's a circle of 3 people, whatever influence I do have, whatever relationships I do have, I want to establish a good sunnah and not a bad sunnah. I want to set a precedent that leads towards huda and not towards dalal, guidance and not misguidance. And this is one of the teachings that Imam Ali alayhi salam gave, salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, to his governor. When he appointed him as the governor of Egypt, he was never able to reach Egypt and to take up that position because he was martyred on the way. Malik al-Ashtar. Now all of you have heard the name of Malik al-Ashtar, but he was somebody very special for Amir al-Mu'mineen. He was not a ma'soom, he was not a member of Ahlul Bayt. But it is reported that Imam Ali said about Malik al-Ashtar, لَقَدْ كَانَ لِي كَمَا كُنْتُ لِرَسُولِ اللَّهِ. He was to me as I was to the Messenger of Allah, always ready with his source of strength and obedience, always present to carry whatever task or obligation his leader had given him. Just as Imam Ali was always there in the battlefield and out of the battlefield to obey whatever command, no matter how easy or difficult, no matter how simple or complex it may be for Rasulullah, Imam Ali says that that was how Malik al-Ashtar was for me. So that letter of Imam Ali to Malik al-Ashtar, it is not just a simple document of how to be an effective governor. It is a very profound document that comprehensively tells us how to be a good Muslim. Because Imam Ali, he is teaching and instructing somebody in whom he has that high level of trust and confidence. That when news came that he was martyred by Muawiyah, the family of Malik al-Ashtar says that Imam Ali was so grieved at his death that we thought that it was the relative of Imam Ali that had been martyred rather than our own relative. Imam Ali was actually more saddened than even the relatives of Malik, because he knew the value of that person as a worshipper of Allah and a believer and a follower of the path of Islam. So one of the things that Imam Ali mentions in his letter to Malik is لا تنقض سنة صالحة عمل بها صدور هذه الأمة واجتمعت بها الألفة وصلحت بها الرعية. Don't undo any sunnah salihah, any good practice that has been established within the ummah, and wajtama'at bihal ulfa, that has brought people's hearts together, wasaluhat bihal ra'iyya, and that has given a good life to the common people and to the general body of Muslims. If there is a good practice, then don't just come there and say that, well, you know what, I know better. That's another tendency within our society. We think that everything new is good and everything old is ignorant. And there's a saying that people sometimes actually believe is true. They say, one of the things you notice about all of these backward countries that aren't able to ever progress economically and scientifically is that people still listen to their parents. That is the sign of an arrogant society, that you think the reason for somebody to be backward or lack progress is a respect for parents or tradition. Now we're living in the days where we will be able to perhaps even see with our own eyes what are the harms for turning your back on even good and noble traditions. But the reality is that in a healthy society, you are willing to analyze, critique, refine, and improve. But you don't just say that everybody who is older and experienced is automatically outdated. You don't look at tradition with a negative glance, but rather you value it even if it is in need of improvement. The Imam says that, O Malik, لا تنقض سنة صالحة. Now, this is less than 30 years after the death of the Prophet. And Egypt was conquered towards the end of the caliphate of Umar ibn al-Khattab, the second caliph. So in total, it's been less than 2 decades since Egypt has even entered into the Muslim territory. And the vast majority of the population of Egypt is still Christian. They're Coptic, and until less than 20 years ago, they were part of the Roman Empire. Now they have entered into the Muslim domain, but majority non-Muslim, and still familiar with their old practices. So Imam Ali is sending a message with his governor, لا تنقض سنة صالحة عمل بها صدور هذه الأمة. If there is something that has been established, not necessarily going back to the Prophet, because then it wouldn't just be سنة صالحة عمل بها صدور هذه الأمة, it would be سنة النبي. Of course, سنة النبي is an obligation. But if there is a practice that is not contrary to the teachings of Islam, and it has been established among the Muslims, it's familiar to the people, it has brought ulfa and it has brought salah. It has brought conciliation and it has brought prosperity and goodness to the ummah and to the ra'iyah, to the common body of Muslims. Then Imam Ali says that honor it. وَلَا تُحْدِثَنَّ سُنَّةً تَضُرُّ بِشَيْءٍ مِّن مَاضِي تِلْكَ السُّنَنِ. And don't start a new practice that is going to weaken or compromise the past of any of those good practices. This is the approach of a Muslim. This is Imam Ali telling Malik how to act when you are going into a kafir society. Yes, as a governor and as a ruler, but a society where the language and the religion and the culture is not necessarily compatible with Islam. look at your ummah and your practices and your traditions and see what is constructive and in accordance with Islamic values, preserve and honor that, and only change one of those precedents if it is in opposition to Islam and to your values. And then do so only in a way to bring it more in accord with your ideals, not because of your own desire. So this is the teaching of Imam Ali alayhi salam for Malik al-Ashtar. Be respectful of tradition, but don't be bound by it. And one of the things that sometimes makes us a little bit impatient and frustrated is because we don't realize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a purpose within society. We are not responsible for fixing every wrong, but rather we are responsible for perfecting our intention and sincerity and offering ourselves to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But then Allah has His own schedule and His own wisdom of when He wants certain things to take place. Because He is managing and governing the affairs of the universe and the progression of human history towards a destination that He has promised us and He has decreed for us from before. And so one of the things that prevents us from becoming impatient and frustrated sometimes at our society and what we may perceive as their backwardness or their ignorance or their inability to listen is to have trust and optimism about Allah and His plan. Imam Ali Rida alayhi salatu wassalam is reported to have said, Ahsin al-dhan billah. Have a good opinion and optimism about Allah. فإن الله عز وجل يقول أنا عند ظن عبد المسلم بي إن خيرا فخيرا وإن شرا فشرا. Because Allah says that whatever opinion you have about me, whether optimistic or pessimistic, that is how I will treat you. That is how I will deal with you. Now, that might seem superficially like it is unkind of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have a tit-for-tat relationship. If you're mean to me, I'm going to be mean to you. If you're kind to me, I'll be kind to you. That's not what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying at all. When Allah says that He will deal with a believer according to their estimation, then Allah is simply informing us that your estimation of Allah defines the expansiveness of your soul. So for example, if I go to a river to get water, if I bring a small container, no matter how big the river might be, the only amount of water that I will be able to take is what's going to fill in that small container. If I bring a larger container, then I can fill and take more water. If two people take two different vessels and the river gives them different amounts of water, then is the river being petty or is the river being tit for tat? Or is it just a reflection of what vessel they brought? You can see this in your own life. If somebody has a negative impression of you, then no matter what kindness you do, they're going to assume the worst. You call them, oh, you remembered me. What do you want? You offer to help them, what are you going to ask me in return? You give them a gift, see now I have to get caught up in this back and forth and it's not even something that So you cannot be kind to somebody if they refuse to be receptive and appreciative of that kindness. When Allah says, أَنَا عِنْدَ ظَنِّ عَبْدِ الْمُؤْمِنِ بِي إِنْ خَيْرًا فَخَيْرًا وَإِنْ شَرًّا فَشَرًّا. Allah is not saying that I am going to be tit for tat. Allah is saying that you look within your own soul and you see how big a vessel do you want to bring to the infinite river of God's mercy and God's grace. You will only take what you open your heart for. But that's not because Allah is lacking in generosity. It is because you were lacking in receptivity. And if you have optimism about Allah, then no adversity can break you. Tonight is the night of the eve of Ashura. A small band of followers of Imam Hasan, loyal to our Prophet, have a few tents, limited arms, a small band of soldiers, and they are surrounded on all sides by a well-armed imperial army, sharpening their weapons, preparing their horses, beating the drums in anticipation of the impending battle. You would think that there would be fear. You would think that there would be lack of hope. But if only we could go inside the tents of Imam Hasan and his companions, we would see that they were as happy and as gladdened at their being surrounded as if they had been in the most comfortable lodgings in the world, because they were in the company of their Imam, because they were in the service of their Lord, because they were honored by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to serve His cause, and they had trust and optimism in the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so it is said that that night of Ashura, it passed in worship and recitation of Quran. It passed in preparation for the battle. At some time during that night, perhaps Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas would have brought together the youth of Banu Hashim, and he would have told them of the courage of Imam Ali and reminded them of the covenant. And he would have said to them that, "O my young members of my family, I trained you in the arts of battle, and I raised you to be courageous for this day that will come tomorrow. When the day breaks and the battle begins, let no one say that the youth of Banu Hashim were not prepared or that their courage faltered." And maybe not far from there, Habib ibn Mudahir had gathered the companions of the Imam, old and venerable warriors. And he would have said that, "O my companions, it is but one more night that lies between you and the company of the Prophet. Do not think that you are going to go to death, but you are going towards eternal life. Remember that Allah has honored you to be the guardians of your Imam, the grandson of the Prophet, the family of the Prophet. When the battle begins tomorrow, let no one say that we wavered in our loyalty or that we were not courageous in battle. Let no one from the family of Imam Hussein be injured or martyred so long as any of us live." And at the arms of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, the youth of Banu Hashim pledged their readiness for battle. And in front of Habib, the soldiers among the companions of the Imam, they pledged their readiness for battle. The Imam gathered his companions, and this was the Majlis of Ashura, which the Imam conducted before the battle began. He told each of those martyrs how and where they would achieve martyrdom, and he congratulated them. And the Imam wept as they went in prostration, thanking Allah that He had honored them with such a unique honor. And then Imam Hussein, he came to the members of his own family. He told Ali Akbar how he would be martyred. He told Aun Muhammad. He told the brothers of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, the 4 sons of al-Baneen. And just to hear how viciously they would be attacked was perhaps too much for the companions and for the loved ones of Imam Hussein to bear. And then there were some that were too difficult even for Imam himself to mention. He never spoke in detail of the martyrdom of Qasim, because Qasim was the orphan son of his beloved brother. For Imam Hussein, it was too much to speak of how Qasim would be surrounded by the enemy and how he would be martyred. And then the final martyr, the final warrior from the family of the Imam, was his infant son, Ali Asghar, an infant of 6 months, who could not walk, who could not speak, who could not wear armor, but he also gave his life in the honor and in the way of Islam. It is said that on the day of Ashura, when all had been martyred and Imam Hussein was truly alone, he went on to the plains of Karbala, and in the desert he called out, "Hal min dhanbin yadhubbu an harami Rasulullah." Will anyone come to the defense of the family of the Prophet? And there was a commotion from the tents. Imam Hussein came back. He said to Lady Zainab, "Oh, my sister, what is the commotion? I am yet alive." She said that, "Oh, my brother, when your infant son heard your voice, it was as if there was an energy that came into him in spite of his weakness, and he threw himself from his cradle. I felt as if he were answering your call." The Imam said that, "Give me my son so that I can bid him farewell." And when Imam Hussein held Ali Asghar in his arms, he saw that his son was so weak with thirst that he was not even able to cry. He was not even able to move his lips. The Imam took his son in his arms, covered him with his cloak, and went before the enemy. They thought the Imam had come to seek peace. But when the Imam approached and stood before his enemy, he removed the cloak, and in his arms he held an infant son. The Imam said that, "If you will fight me, then fight me. If you think that I have wronged you, then go and take your vengeance against me. But what has this infant son done? Do you not see how he is so weak that he is between life and death?" And the words of the Imam were so pure that even the enemy was moved to tears. Umar ibn Sa'd gave the command, "O my archer Harmala, cut the speech of Imam Hussein before he tears my army away from me." According to some narrations, Harmala never missed a target when he aimed, but he saw one arrow and missed. He shot a second arrow and missed. And it was because whenever he would take the aim, there was the wail of a grieving lady that he heard in his ears. But the third arrow that he shot, it was an arrow with 3 points, and it came with such ferocity that it not only pierced, it entirely cut the head of Ali Asghar as he lay in the arms of Imam Hussein. And as the Imam saw the life leave the body of his infant son, he cupped the blood of Ali Asghar in his arms, and he turned towards the heavens, and there came a voice from the heavens that, O Hussein, if a drop of this blood comes towards the heavens, then there shall be no rain on earth. The Imam looked towards the ground, and the ground called out that, O Hussein, this pure blood should not be spilled on the earth, for it will remove God's mercy from humanity. Imam Hasan, he took that blood and he rubbed it on his own face and on his beard. He said, this is how I will go before my grandfather on the day of judgment. And then Imam Hasan, he held the body of Ali Asghar in his arms. He went towards the tent, but then he said, how will I not bear the sight of a child bloodied and martyred in such a pitiable state? How will Rabab be able to survive the sight of her infant son? 7 times the Imam went back and forth until he lovingly laid Ali Asghar on the ground, and with his sword he dug a shallow grave and he placed Ali Asghar in the earth. The only martyr buried by Imam Hussein on Karbala was his infant son Ali Asghar. But after the battle was done, Umar ibn Sa'd gave the order that find where Imam Hussein buried his son, and 30,000 soldiers dug their spears into the ground looking for that grave, until one spear was raised aloft and the body of Ali Asghar was on it. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. فسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلب. Allah accept this remembrance on our behalf, and through the honor of Imam Hussein and Ali Asghar and the martyrs of Karbala, grant us always the love of Ahlul Bayt and tears in our eyes for their suffering and service of their path for ourselves and our families and our children until the day of judgment. O Allah, hasten the appearance of our Imam and grant him victory over all falsehood, and allow us to be among his sincere followers. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Brothers and sisters, kindly make your way upstairs at this time. Thank you.